Welcome to our Visionary Pioneers, a conversation with the innovators of 2013. With us today are 5 of the 6 remarkable individuals who were formally inducted last night. The 6th glass artist, Jackie Pancari, is hosting an exhibit of her work entitled Optical Reflective Phenomena in the nearby Student Innovation Hall. And I hope you'll get to visit that before you leave today. She got to show some of her incredibly genius glass combinations last evening in the video. As you know, the Imagine RIT Festival celebrates the abundance of creativity and innovation that bursts out of every classroom, every studio, and common space on campus. The exhibits you'll see today are mounted by students and faculty, and you may very well meet future members of the Innovation Hall of Fame throughout this day. If you were there last night, we introduced to you some of the most amazing minds affiliated with RIT. Through the tribute videos, you learned how these visionary pioneers have changed the world in ways that couldn't possibly have been imagined until these innovators began to explore, examine, test, try, and apply their creative insights to a particular puzzle that they sought to solve. And this is a path and a long journey for many of these folks. There's not an innovator or creator who hasn't gone down the wrong path, but realized that they were going to persist until they solved the problem. Today we have a rare opportunity to ask Robert Fabio, Lynn Fuller, John Schott, Bruce Smith, and Paul Taylor, probing questions about the how and the why of their particular approach to innovation. And we will be privy to their conversation with one another as they share their insights into the innovative and creative process. I know you're eager to hear from our innovators, so without further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to our panel moderator, Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Jeremy Hafner. Jeremy, like me, is a mathematics major, but more importantly, for the last several years, he has taken RIT in a new direction, embracing innovation and creativity, and has done the work of about 4 provosts in that amount of time. So please help me welcome Jeremy Hafner.
Thank you, Barry, for that wonderful, albeit complete distortion of the truth, but I very much appreciate it. I always like to think of prime numbers, so it's either got to be 3 or 5. I don't know which one it is on that one. But anyway, it's a great pleasure to come back from last night and have a different session and an opportunity for folks from all over the Rochester area to get a little further insight to the innovation process that these 5, 6 wonderful individuals have made such great accomplishments and successes with. Before I go too much farther, I would like to acknowledge the wonderful services that our interpreters provide. This enables events like this one to open and access to our deaf and hard of hearing community here. So a round of applause for our interpreters. And there's one last other call out that I would like to make here because she neglected to call herself out in all of the wonderful events last night, and that's Christine Corrado. She is our logistic guru who, the glue, if you will, that brought us all together and made these events so wonderful. So Christine, thank you so much for your work. As you can see, we're going to have a very casual, very informal conversation with our 5 innovators here. And I want to make sure that you feel empowered to ask questions along the way. the plan here is to have a sort of a moderated conversation for the first 30 minutes. We've got 3 very interesting but broad topics that we're going to toss to this wonderful group here. But then for the last 30 minutes or so, we want to open it up to questions that you might have. So there's a couple of ways that you can get us questions. One is the traditional pen and paper approach, because I think in your materials you might have a little tear-out card, I think, that you can write down a question on, and we have staff around here that will help collect those cards at the appropriate time. However, this is RIT, the T stands for technology, so we also have a way of tweeting the answers to us. You can tweet your questions to hashtag RITIHF. Again, that's hashtag RITIHF if you have a smartphone. The IHF, by the way, stands for Innovation Hall of Fame. I had to think about that myself. So, and then the third way is the good old-fashioned raise your hand. I got a question and I want to ask somebody. So we'll make sure we'll do the whole gamut right now. So before we get into the various topics here, I'm going to ask our 5 panelists, and of course, we're very appreciative of Jackie serving the role that she is in her exhibition in the Student Innovation Center. We wish she was here. But of our 5 wonderful panelists, I'm going to, oh, she is here. Oh, okay, there's Jackie. Hi, Jackie. I'm sorry, I didn't see you in the audience there. Very good. Thank you for being a part of that. I'm going to ask our panelists here to introduce themselves, name, title, current company, what you're best known for is for the benefits of the audience, and of course then your relationship to RIT. So, Bob, will you start us off?
Sure. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Bob Fabio. I'm the chairman of White Glove Health. I think I'm best known for being a serial entrepreneur that seems to have a knack for starting game-changing ideas. My affiliation with RIT is I came here to study computer science and graduated in 1985 with a master's degree.
Thank you, Bob. John?
I'm John Schott. I have the Frederick and Anna V. Weidman Chaired Professorship in Imaging Science, and I do remote sensing. I've been on the faculty here for 32 years, and I spend most of my time looking at the Earth from airplanes and satellites.
Wonderful. Lynn?
And I'm Lynn Fuller. I'm a professor in microelectronic engineering. And I think I'm best known for creating that program and making microchips, teaching students, and hopefully influencing the microelectronics industry.
Bruce?
I'm Bruce Smith. I am currently the director of our PhD program in microsystems engineering, but I hope I'm not best known as a college administrator or something like that. I hope I'm best known as a professor. And I am in a similar field as Lynn. Actually, I worked with Lynn for many years in microelectronic engineering. And what I do is I try to make things really, really small, because at the heart of what we do in the computer business is try to cram more stuff into small spaces. So I consider it my job as one of the guys to try to make things smaller and smaller and smaller.
Bruce, you'll always be known as a professor. Let's just get that
Thanks.
out there. And last, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Taylor. I am retired now. I retired in the year 2005. And I recommend retirement for everyone. Let's see. I taught here at NTID for 30 years, and I enjoyed every moment of that. Before that, I got involved with teletype and enabling deaf people to use the telephone system. So I'm happy to see all of you here today.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Okay, so let's get started. We've got 3, I think, very interesting topics. And we're going to start with sort of the broad topic about how these innovators look at innovation. and the vision that is necessary to drive innovation forward. So the question is the following. Gentlemen, when you think of visionary thinking and innovation, what are the first things that come to mind? And I think to help maybe guide you in that question, I was thinking it might be interesting to hear what you think are maybe the necessary ingredients or the sufficient ingredients for a very robust, innovative climate. So I think the students here might benefit from any kind of personal philosophies that you'd like to share and any recommendations that you can make having had such rich experiences in your life. So, Bob, can I start with you and get you started?
Sure. I'm going to try my mic. I'm going to hold my mic there. I think when I look at innovation, I take a bit of a different approach. I'm a technologist by background and training, and so I have lots of technical degrees, but I don't study the technology first. I look at the market, the size of the market, how many folks you can address, what's the ultimate size of a business entity that could ultimately pursue a particular market, what's the problem that they have, and then what's the novel solution that can be brought to the market, and then all of the other things that go along with it, like pricing and packaging and distribution and competitive landscape and business model, et cetera.
Great, okay. Bruce, why don't you go next here, and then we'll
Sure.
jump around a little bit.
Well, let me start with thinking about what innovation means to various folks. And that may mean something like making things better or different or new in some way, and reasons might be for some want or wish or desire to do so. And I know talking to a lot of students that hear, well, you've got some patents, what's it all about? Trying to think about what is the difference between what we mean by innovation and maybe by invention, and then a patent, and what are they all the same thing, and what do I need to do to get there? A patent is just a piece of paper. It's a recognition by maybe a government of an invention. So behind the patent is an invention. And an invention doesn't have to be a new idea, a good idea. I'm sorry, it should be a new idea. It doesn't have to be a good idea. It doesn't have to be practical. Nothing about it has to be usable. And that's different from innovation, right? Because innovation we usually think of as, it's got that aspect that is better. It's different and it's better. And I think a lot of times students aspire to being involved in innovation, in invention, and maybe even having a patent, and sometimes for the wrong reasons. It's because they want their name to something or they want that recognition. And I think if that's the way you go about doing this, my goal is someday to have a patent, it's very likely that that's not going to be a very good invention, or it's not going to be a lot of innovation behind it. So I think the key is the whole innovation side. New ideas, and this is the kind of stuff Bob talked about, new ideas for needs that are out there or applications you can think of, clever ways to apply things. I think that's the best way to approach this. And then creating the kind of environment for this innovation and not worry so much about documenting it and patenting and those kind of things.
So it's about motivation, and to a large extent. What do you want to change the world with your ideas in a certain sense?
Yeah, and we've talked about this last night, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more today, is what kind of barriers are there that inhibit or prevent others from doing that, you yourself or others that work for you, and creating an environment that can remove those kind of barriers, and asking people what is in your way, what would be in your way to continue on doing what you're doing better what you're doing, thinking of new ideas.
Great. Paul, how about you? What's your philosophy on innovation?
Well, I gave some thought to that after last night, and especially after I saw the biographies of all my esteemed colleagues here and what they've done in the work world. And my idea of innovation is very different from theirs. My idea was always 100% based on really the need that I saw. It really had nothing to do with business, entrepreneurship, profitability. It was really looking at the deaf community and seeing the need that was there, allowing them a way to use the phone, finding better ways to improve the lives and the lives of everyone else as well within that community. And I know that there was a very big need. I grew up that way because I can remember so well when I was growing up. You know, farmers often would make phone calls for me, or family would make phone calls for me, family and friends, and I was very tired. And I was thinking about, for example, I wanted to call a girl for a date. And I thought, well, should I ask my mother to call for the date? And I thought, no, I can't do that. So that was just one small example of a need. And then when I went to college, at that time in colleges, there were no interpreters, because that was way back in 1957. So I had to do things with myself. I had to do something for myself. I knew I wanted to go, you know, very far, and in order to do that with my deafness, I had to do something about communication and the telephone. And I didn't know what to do until my wife Sally, the two of us, went to the New York World's Fair. And we saw at the time this picture phone. And my goodness, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotion with this. It was this aha moment in my life. I had never seen something like that before in my life. And I knew that that would work for deaf people, that there must be some way that we had to be able to use that. So instead of the 50-pound teletype machines that we had, Bruce, you had an example of the very small, I mean, this is Bruce's field in making things smaller and smaller. My God, it's absolutely amazing how we've come from there with these huge 50-pound teletype machines to these small phones. And in the future, now we'll have the Google glasses. And how many of you have tried the Google glasses? Have you seen those and given them a try yet?
You mean I'm ahead?
You mean I'm all ahead of the rest of you? Anyway, my point being,
I mean, 50 years.
the 50 years, what progress has been made in the explosion of knowledge and technology, and I'm very proud of all the scientists, the engineers, the business people, the entrepreneurs that became involved in improving our lives. So it's fantastic. And if later you have more questions, I'd be more than glad to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Bruce, John. John, let's hear from you.
I thought about this a little bit, knowing such a question would come on, and realized I don't have a philosophy of innovation. I really think that what motivates me is just the problem solving. I love it when somebody comes to me with a problem, and that just stimulates the challenge of how do we figure out a solution to that problem. And I think I agree with Bruce's thought that I see a big difference between invention and innovation. Lots of people invent new things, and that's a great creative process, but it's really a personal process. And I see innovation as more the taking of inventions, whether they're your own or somebody else's, and popularizing them, making them useful, taking them to the point where they can induce change. And so I don't think of that as a philosophy. What motivates me to do new things and to change things is really somebody presenting me with a problem.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. I think we'll have another question here in just a few moments about, does that usefulness of an idea have to be manifested in a commercialization of a product? But we'll get to there in just a minute. But Lynn?
Yes, I have something to say about this. I think innovation comes from a personal desire to learn something. And then as you dig into that, you have to embed yourself into something and learn about it before the innovation can come about. And then I'll give you an example. So when when I went to school, we didn't have DNA. So I had to.
Some of us are still not sure.
I know. So I wanted to learn about this stuff. It was DNA. And then once I learned about that, I wanted to learn more, and I got involved in trying to identify DNA, and we integrated DNA on microchips in order to identify it. There's been a startup company that I consulted with who has been around for about 10 years now, and they can identify molecular fragments of DNA. And so it takes that initial curiosity to begin with, and then you have to immerse yourself in that so that you can understand how you can help. And then you have to persevere and really work hard, because it's going to be very time consuming, and you're going to work on weekends and nights and everything. So those three things: personal interest, the immersion, and then the perseverance. And that's how you get to innovation.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. I think you saw a wide range of different ideas behind the driving of innovation here. I heard identifying a need, thinking about how you can really take that idea and have a big impact. And then, of course, we just heard about personal desire and drive and motivation on this. I have one last question in this category. And I'm going to just throw it open to any of you rather than soliciting all of your opinions. There's research out there that shows that having diverse perspectives is a driver for the creative process, that having more people around the table with different backgrounds, different origins, different orientations might really create a very, I guess, rich environment for the creative process. And I'm wondering, all of you have had teams in some sort of sense. In fact, when we looked at the videos, you all gave great credit, not to yourselves, but to the people that you've worked with. So I'm wondering, in your experiences, have you seen this notion that diverse perspectives has really been helpful in your innovation? And I see Len holding up his hand, so Len, take us on that one.
Yeah, I want to continue with this chip that identifies DNA. There's no way, that's a very interesting project, but there's no way I could have done that without a team. And when you have a team, you need to do something like that, you need microbiologists, you need chemists, you need the chip makers and all that. But I've been on many different teams, and they're always kind of fun, but I've learned one thing, and I'll give you a piece of advice. If you're the smartest one on your team, you should get a new team. So it'll be a better team.
Great tip. Bruce, how about you?
So I'll follow up with Lynn because, as I mentioned before, he and I are working very similar in the same field. And that's a semiconductor field, microchips, computer chips. And you may think that that's a pretty narrow field. And it takes a lot of people that think the same to work in that area. But actually, the very opposite is true. Because we have to bring together so many disciplines in a field like that. There are plenty of chemists and physicists and engineers of every kind. That, I think, has been a big strength of the innovation in the semiconductor industry, is all the types of people that have been involved from the very beginning. You look at in the 60s and 70s, and the individuals that came from the universities to develop that industry in San Jose and Silicon Valley. And those guys came from all over the place. And it still goes on like that. You may work with a psychologist, you may work with a biologist, and all in the semiconductor industry.
Yeah, great point. Bob?
I was going to add that, my mic, excuse me. I was going to add, not only is it essential, it's actually where the fun comes in, because you get to learn from each other. So White Glove, I didn't know anything about healthcare really, or clinical subject matter, or pharmaceutical subject matter, and I found myself quickly immersed in the domain knowledge of all these other folks and trying to assimilate it all, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But it was also essential.
Yeah, great. Anyone else? John?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, but I think the team, you need to broaden the concept of team, and one of the reasons I think so much innovation comes out of the nation's universities is because our students are part of our teams. and they ask the most off-the-wall, absurd questions, comfortably so. Often in the team environment, you got smart people, they're afraid to be stupid. And I find that students stimulate an incredible amount of innovation by asking questions in a way you would have never thought of. And so, you know, maybe I got a team working a project, but we present that information, we talk to the students about that information in classes and in informal events, and they ask strange questions, they stimulate you to think differently, and all of a sudden, you're going off in a direction you may not have even thought of, because in trying to answer their question, they make you think differently. And so I think that that's one of the things that universities bring uniquely to innovation, is this whole wealth of people who think out of the box because they haven't been in the box yet.
Yep, yep. I think that ability to ask questions is so wonderful in our youth. They aren't bridled by constraints like that. Paul, did you have your hand up?
Yes, you did. I want to talk about one deaf inventor. And a lot of people think that I did the inventing, and that's not true. The deaf inventor, he was from California, and he went to the University of Southern California. He grew up alone, and what I mean by that, he was the only deaf person in his family. So he was really alone all of his life, but his mind was absolutely brilliant. So he was searching for an opportunity for social life, and he joined what was called the RTTY, radio teletype. That was popular in the 40s and the 50s. And all of his friends were in the RTTY network. And he would meet them and become friends, and he happened to tell someone about me, and I just happened to have access to all the teletype equipment. I didn't know myself how the teletype equipment worked in the ins and out of the phone lines, because the teletypes in that line were all connected to private lines. And it wasn't practical for deaf people to have those systems. And his name was Bob Whitebrecht. He was the inventor, Bob Whitebrecht. He and I met, and then he started to explain his invention and how that worked. Now, he had already had a patent on his invention. And he said, you know, he explained to me how it worked. And then after that, I thought to myself, that would be such an easy thing, and no one had thought about that before. And in summary about that, you know, he talked about the ABCs of all of everything. What he did was, if you look at a keyboard of the teletype machine, he invented a different pulse for every stroke, from 1, 2, and 5, and so forth. Some would have 2, 3, or 4 pulses, so every key had a different pulse. And what he did was just convert the pulses to sound. That's all. And if there was no pulse, there would be no sound. And then at the other end of the line, the receiver would receive the sound, and then it would be converted on the teletype. So it was very easy to go back and forth on a phone line through his invention, but no one had ever thought about that before. So the two of us worked together, and I was very fortunate that my wife's father was familiar with some people from Western Union. And they happened to have all these old teletype machines just stockpiled from World War II. So we went through all the appropriate paperwork, and my wife and I worked together going through that long process. And at the end, all the deaf saw what we were able to do with that invention, and in short, it became history. So I just wanted to really point out there's a big difference between the inventor and the innovator. Bob and I were two completely different people, but both of us had the same goal.
Great example. Paul, thank you. We've talked about what innovation means and how these innovators look at that and their vision behind it. We're going to turn now to what clouds that vision. What are the impediments to innovators? What gets in the way sometimes? I recently finished a book about Albert Einstein. It's the biography written by Walter Isaacson. And one of the interesting takeaways about that was Einstein was adamant about the creative process. And he was so clear in his mind that the individual needed the freedom to be able to pursue ideas, even if those ideas met with great resistance. And of course, he grew up in a time when the world was with great turmoil. And he took away even stronger political beliefs about how the government should maintain those individual freedoms. And he carried that throughout his whole life. So he was a particular individual that saw some of those impediments to his own creative process. So to our team, we're asking the question, what can stymie creative and visionary innovators? Is it street pressure with companies being too near-term focused and reactive due to quarter-to-quarter financial pressure from Wall Street? Is it something in the atmosphere of our culture? Are there too many inputs and demands on time to allow for those visionary thinking? And how do you clear out the space and time for your own innovation process to occur? So talk a little bit about those impediments. Who would like to go first? Let me start with Bob.
So this is an interesting question. I think all the things that you've listed certainly get in the way of folks having the freedom to think and innovate. But my experience has been that mostly what it is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Those that are afraid, those that are uncertain, or those that doubt stand in the way often of those that want to do something new, and will erect all kinds of obstacles in their mind and beyond to say you can't do it. That coupled with bureaucracy. I'm not a big proponent of large organizations only because I find that they stymie creative thought and innovation. And so those are the things for me that cloud innovation.
Yep, very good. Bruce.
Yeah, I'll go next because I have a feeling as we go on through the rest of this, it's going to get harder and harder to say some of the originals. And you already quoted Einstein, and I think he'd be the smartest man in the room if he was here. So if you think about it, there is a lot of creativity and innovation that comes out of the universities. In the corporate world, if it is your job to be creative, okay, this week you need to be creative. By the end of the week, report to me what you created. Report to me what you innovated, and that will belong to us, the company. And if you think about just that kind of environment and how that would promote innovation and creativity versus the kind of environments we have at the universities where really as faculty or those involved in things that go on here, students as well, we've got the freedom, and that really is our job, is to take advantage of that freedom to come up with new ideas and innovate. So I think it's just natural for lots of good things to come out of universities. And of course, it's the job of the university to ensure that it stays that way. And as Bob said, remove any bureaucracy or anything that tends to discourage those kind of new ideas.
You made a great case for academic freedom in that. I appreciate that. John.
This term innovation is a curious term, and my good friend Ed Frisbilowitz recently recommended a book to me called The Professor and the Madman, and it's hard to believe that you could bother to read a book about the writing of the Oxford English Dictionary. It sounds incredibly dry, incredibly boring. I recommend it to all of you. It's just the opposite. It's a very fascinating story, but that's the aside to get me into the Oxford English Dictionary, is a very unique piece of work in that instead of just giving you the definition of words, it tells you the evolution of the word and its path through history. So being inducted into this Innovation Hall of Fame, I took the time to look up what innovation was in the OED. And it turns out, and this is curious that the university is celebrating innovation, because the word really came into the literature in the 1500s-ish, and it had all sorts of negative connotations. Innovators were people who practiced the new religions, who encouraged and accepted the new religions. And of course, this was an era when both the church and government was dominated by authority and authoritarian figures and localized, centralized authority. And so change, the very nature of change, was unaccepted and inappropriate behavior. And here we are celebrating innovation. So the connotation has changed in our culture, but the early connotation of innovation, I think, reflects a lot of, there's resistance to change. The corporate sector, Robert started it out right, the corporate sector is by its nature resistant to change. Most of our culture is resistant to change. And so innovation is by its nature fighting the status quo. And so you have to be in a place where you can get past, or at least get that initial thumbhold in to move beyond the status quo. And I just think the curiosity to me was here we are celebrating innovation in an environment where, if you look at the origins of the word, it would be just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. And what was the name of the book? Professional Madmen?
The Professor and the Madman.
Oh, The Professor and the Madman.
Simon Winchester is the author.
Excellent. Lynn, do you want to take a stab at any obstacles or impediments that you had to overcome in the innovation process here?
Well, yes, there are always impediments, and there's usually ways around them. One of the things I find that's hard is to find the time that you need to think without interruption. You need uninterrupted time for an hour or two each day. Fortunately, I live 35 miles away and I drive without my radio on, and I think. So I have about 2 hours a day to think about what I should be thinking about, and that's worked for me. I don't know how I do it because as soon as I get to RIT or get home, there's always things going on and I can't think really. Another thing I've learned is even if you are on the right track, you can get run over if you're not moving fast enough. So you have to get on the right track and you gotta move, otherwise the competition's gonna crush you. So just think about that a little bit too.
Great. Great. Paul, any other things you want to add? No?
No, not really.
Okay. Last question. Jackie, I'm going to turn to you. I didn't know you were going to be here. Can you come down here, please? Would you mind participating in this very last question, because I think it's an important one that we hear from your perspective on this one. And the last topic is about validating visionary innovation. Now, unfortunately, we won't have a microphone for Jackie, but...
We got one.
We got one. Okay, good. The question here is, how do we validate innovation? It's been said that invention is the realization of a new idea, but innovation is the successful commercialization of an invention in the marketplace. Okay? Is this so? In each of your fields, there certainly are commercial applications to what you've created: communication networks, better industrial processes, technologies that support space exploration and also integrate into technologies, business systems that capitalize on technology, both new and old, to deliver services to meet individual needs. There's money to be made in all of these arenas through your innovations, but I think we all are wondering, and especially now that we have Jackie with us, is innovation only about the commercialization? Jackie, you're an artist, a glass artist, and your innovation down in the Student Innovation Center brings great impact to the viewer in that regard. So I'm going to start with Jackie, if you don't mind. Tell us about how you view innovation in the lens of commercialization, and is that a necessary ingredient for the validation of what you do?
You know, I was listening to all these other questions, and I really wanted to participate in answering all of the other ones, and then this one comes along, and it's probably the one that is most difficult for me, because even though I am a glass artist, and you know, one of the things that I can do is I can produce many of one thing and do vases and goblets and all of that, and you know, get myself into the market and sell these things. So commercially, you know, that's one approach. But my process and my thinking is not like that at all. Although I do multiples of pieces, and I do love to produce, you know, multiples, but the innovative process and the creative process for me is really dulled by the act of actually having to think about selling this and putting it into, you know, a gallery or a store or into the marketplace, because I just am all of a sudden deflated, okay? Because for me, I approach my process with curiosity, and I need to follow my heart and really follow my path, and sometimes that doesn't take you down the money road. And then eventually, I think you sort of have to trust yourself enough to get there. And so, you know, the way that I've, you know, again, you can take a couple approaches where my process has been, I've been an artist in resident, I've taught, I've done workshops, and I can't, again, burden myself with having to sell these pieces. Otherwise, I just, again, wouldn't get there. So
Great.
It's kind of complicated.
It is a complicated question.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive in a little deeper into it. Bob, you want to add your perspective?
Yeah, I don't think the making of money has anything to do with the validation of innovation. Innovation just happens. And sometimes you focus on making money through it, and sometimes you don't. But the one thing that hasn't been talked about today that has been a big area of innovation in my world is not just around technology. Often how you go to market and how you address the market and what channels of distribution requires a great deal of innovation. And so if your focus is on making money, which is mine generally has been, most of the innovation comes less from the technology stuff and more from all of the ways that you have to weave yourself through a complex mess in a market. You know, the competitive landscape and who are your allies and who are not, and how you get to these folks and what do you say to these folks and how do you get them to open up their checkbook and how do you get them to keep opening up their checkbook requires a great deal of thinking.
Yep. Yeah. Lynn?
Yes, I can give you a couple of examples where you don't make money. So, Terry Clapham was one of my, either he was a student of mine or we were classmates. It was a long time ago. Well, he invented LASIK, or something like, I don't know if he was the total inventor of LASIK, but he was deeply involved with LASIK, which is the eye surgery to replace your glasses. He never saw a dollar, really, because 30 years later he retired before it was approved by the FDA, and they was actually allowed to be done in the United States. So I'm sure he invented most of that stuff and did profit somehow, but not while he was working on the business. And the second example is Dr. Prachadas and I just recently got a patent on a viscosity sensor for putting in automobiles to tell you when to change the oil of your car. So we may never get any money out of that even though I think it's pretty creative. And hopefully there'll be a game changer that'll completely do something different, like come up with an oil that never needs to be changed. And that would be even better. So there's a lot of places where what you invent, kind of the need for it disappears because of other inventions.
Great. Bruce?
I'll have a comment. I have a comment. I'll make it quick. The world of patents and invention today is changing dramatically. And it's unfortunate because it's driven by big companies. It is company A versus company B, or even country A versus country B. You see Japanese companies suing Korean companies and vice versa. All the big industries are driving, really making the whole patent scheme very difficult for smaller individuals or smaller companies to be involved. What used to be a distraction from the point of innovation to invention to a patent, I mean, you got to take time to do that, is now really, I think, an impediment. And I think I would encourage those that are thinking about that path of, I've got a great idea, what do I do with it? Think less about patenting it and think more about really trying to make an impact with that. Because if you're a little guy and you own that patent, it may only be as good as that piece of paper itself.
Great comments. Great comments. And I know we have some experts in the audience on patents, and they may want to ask you some more questions about that, Bruce, down the road. John or Paul, how about your thoughts on commercialization and innovation?
Well, Paul here. I would say it's like I said before. Really what I did was really based on what I saw as a need. And when I started with the TTY and the teletype machines, I wasn't thinking about making money. Actually, that was the furthest thing on my mind. I wanted to see my friends be able to use the telephone. But in doing that, I could only serve a few at a time. And it really took a long time for that network to grow. But it was fun at the time, and I enjoyed it. I got a lot of personal satisfaction seeing how happy the people were through that technology and through, I guess I would call that my main reward. But yeah, I have thought about other things that could be made or invented in the future, but really that is nothing compared to the great need that myself and the entire deaf community had at that time. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. John, any? Okay. All right. So we've had some questions on innovation, their impediments, and kind of the validation process of the innovation environment, if you will. Now's the time for the audience to give us some questions. We've got one question from submitted through the Twitter process, which is great. We also have the ability to ask questions just from the audience. We're a small group, and I want you to feel free to be able to put your hand up, and we can take a microphone around and ask the question that way. But the question from the Twitter audience is a great one. So this is to our panelists. You've often mentioned about innovation having this big impact, maybe even changing the world. So to achieve your goals of changing the world, to what extent did you have to change yourself? Or more broadly, to what extent did the innovation process change yourself as you went through it? Anyone want to reflect on that?
I'll take a try.
John.
I'm an inherently... Thanks, Lynn. I'm an inherently a quiet, rather shy individual, and I had ideas that I wanted to put in front of the world. And I did change over a long period. Many people today would not recognize that I'm a particularly quiet, shy individual, but as a youth, I was very much so. And I realized that some of the things I wanted to do and some of the changes I wanted to make, I had to do it. I had to get out in front and do it. So I did actually go through some personal changes in order to make sure that the stuff I wanted to see happen happened.
Bruce?
I like that question, and the way that it started out is if you think you can, something like if you think you can change the world, because I think that's what's necessary. And if you really have some feeling, some belief that what you're doing can change the world, I think the most important thing to do is don't lose that. Because as you start losing that feeling that maybe what you're, no matter how narrow it is, that little thing is going to change some aspect of the world. If you lose sight of that, you lose interest in what you're doing or belief in that can change the world, it will never get done. Yep. So I think that it's less about the question about what do you have to change, but what you shouldn't change if that's what you really feel.
That's a great comment. That's a great observation there. Robert?
Yeah, there's actually, well, at least 3 forms of innovation. There's evolutionary, revolutionary, and disruptive. And to me, the disruptive innovation is what often sets out to change the world. Something that's a minor increment on what's been done before generally doesn't. It's expected, people know it's coming, et cetera. So it's the disruptive innovation that often is the game-changing stuff. As I've said before, in other forms, when you bring something disruptive to a collection of people, folks that are deep-seated in current thinking and money-making and the way they do what they do every day when they get up, it's faced with great resistance. At least in my world, through the years, it's forced great change in me. How to deal with people better, how to navigate around obstacles better, how to be more firm in what I believe, how to believe in what I believe. It just goes on and on and on through the years. There's been just an immense amount of change that's been brought to me personally in pursuing these endeavors.
Great. Good comments. How about Jackie?
Can you just present that question again?
Sure.
For some reason, I'm having a hard time getting it.
Sure, no problem. To achieve your goals of changing the world, to what extent have you had to change yourself?
I guess changing the world is the hard part. I think that's where I'm having a hard time thinking about. I don't set out to change the world. I sort of set out to change myself, and in order to better myself and to follow my passions as much as I can. So it's sort of a big question, and I think I have to get out of the way of myself a lot of time and continue moving on. So.
Good point. Excellent point. Anyone else want to add to it? Other questions from the audience? Craig Smith.
Curious to know what you tell students here at RIT who think that they are both innovators and potentially entrepreneurs, and how you advise them about knowing whether or not they're likely to be successful or if they should go to work for somebody else.
I do that. I answer those kind of questions to the students. So I tell them if they're passionate about it, they should try to do it. And I advise them that they may not be successful the first time. In fact, I tell them that I don't think I've ever done anything perfectly right the first time. And it's important to get past that first time to get to the second time. And then if you persevere, you have a good chance.
Anyone else want to add to that? Bob?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this with my own self, because I've been asked so many times, were you born an innovator, an entrepreneur, or did you become one, or what the heck happened? For me, it's I actually have looked back on my childhood and looked back at all the times that I was resourceful building things or constructing things or making things or selling things or whatever, because that was me. And that's what I use every day when I get up and do the things I do now professionally. So if you were, as a kid, running around peddling stuff or making stuff or creating stuff, you probably got it in your genes to go do that. And if you have an element of defiance, I'll make it brief, but a funny story. I graduated from college and landed at Kodak in the research labs with this bizarre set of academic degrees of chemistry and computer science, and they thought, well, you can build computer systems for PhD physicists and chemists because you can speak their lingo. And I thought, okay, whatever, I'll go do that. And so I find myself in an orientation program for 6 weeks learning how to be a good Kodak citizen and how to program the Kodak way and do all this stuff. And about halfway through it, I get called in a gentleman's office, and he said, Bob, do you know how old Eastman Kodak is this year? And I said, yeah, I think 100 years old. And he said, that's right. And he said, in 100 years, we've never fired anybody in our orientation program, and you're about to be the first. And I said, well, and he said, well, we keep asking you to do things. We give you problems to solve, and we tell you how to go about solving them, and you won't do it that way. And I said, well, that's the whole point. Didn't you hire me to think and to be creative and do things differently? And so if you have that sort of spirit in you, I think that's probably a good underpinning as well. No, I ended up being one of the top people there.
That's a great story, though, and an inspiration for our students. Bruce?
So my comments are similar, but that kind of question doesn't come from the type of student that wants to go into the corporate world, and that's fine. You know, work for a lot of the many great companies that come here to RIT to hire our students. But that kind of question comes from a student that's thinking that, you know, maybe there are other things to do. And my advice to those students is there's plenty of time in your life. If you're in your early 20s, you've got a long career ahead of you, there's plenty of time in your life to go work in that corporate world. In a year or 2 or 5 or 10, or you may find that that's not what you want to do. Now is the time to really explore new things. So that's my advice is if you are wondering whether you want to explore it now.
Jackie?
Well, yeah, I keep thinking that if a student is asking about how they can become an innovator, maybe they're ahead of themselves. And maybe they ought to start thinking about themselves and what they want to do with, you know, whatever they want to think about. I mean, as far as, you know, the art process goes, you don't, you know, a lot of students come in and say, I want to be an artist, and you know, how do I do that? And the problem is you have to work at it. And you have to play with things, and you have to get yourself into really vulnerable and scary spots where you are doubtful. And within that process, you learn where, you know, what you're good at. So, in fact, your brain, you may want to do one thing, but your brain is actually works in a whole other way, and you really should be going in that direction. So, you know, so I think that, I guess what I'm saying is you have to listen to yourself, and you can't sort of, I don't know, maybe some people kind of declare these things that they want to be something, and that could be a good path, but there's sort of a lot of work within the path, and you have to get to know yourself.
Great. We have time for one more question, and we just received it from the audience. So I think we'll close with this questions or set of questions. And the writer is interested in what inspires you today. What inspires you, and what keeps you motivated? What inspires you, and what keeps you motivated? So, who would like to take a stab at that? Lynn?
I'm inspired by learning, and I learn something new every day, and that keeps me going.
Perfect.
I'm inspired by the things that I see and the things that I don't understand, and visually, and everything that I don't understand. That's really what inspires me.
I couldn't agree.
John?
I couldn't agree more. It's the unknown. I think for all of us, it sounds like, or at least the last three, it's the unknown. I think if you've spent a career doing new things, it's the challenge of the unknown and trying to do something new again. It's and frankly, at the university, it's all those bright young minds to take along with you or to challenge you with those problems.
Paul, if I can.
Paul?
Well, what inspires me was really, I would say, the shock, and I'm talking positively now, the positive shock and the positive reaction of all the people that I was able to help with providing access to phone communication. And not only that, all the helpers. And by helpers, I mean people that move the heavy equipment, including them as well. And I never forget the first faces and their expressions when a deaf person was able to pick up the telephone, which they had never been able to use in the entirety of their life, and place it on the equipment and dial, and then they were able to see those new flashes in their life and know that someone at the other end was receiving information. I would sit back and watch the person, and you could see this electric excitement course through their body. And then all of a sudden, they would say GA, which in the code of the time it would mean, they would say LOL, GA, I love you, GA meaning go ahead. And they were communicating. And if you asked my wife, Sally, she could give you thousands of other examples. Just that wonderful shock. And I was able to do something in that person's life. And that was my inspiration. That was what kept me going.
That's wonderful. Absolutely great. Anyone else want to go? Bruce.
It's just simple, and it's a great environment for me here at RIT, because what inspires me, and I learned this many years ago, just the curiosity of younger people. And, you know, we all have good days and bad days, and when you have some of those bad days and be able to get in front of a classroom of students and teach a good class to students that want to learn what you're teaching, that's the inspiration.
So how many students do we have in the audience? Raise your hand. There we go. So students, I think you heard a wonderful message today about, from these innovators, how important your perspective, your youthful questioning of the unknown or the status quo is important to them as they go through an innovation process. We've learned a lot today from these 6 wonderful inventors. We are so proud to have inducted them into the RIT Innovation Hall of Fame. I think we ourselves are inspired from the messages that we had. So audience, let's give a very warm applause and thank you to our innovators. And I do want to encourage everyone.
Could I just add one thing quickly? You know, I want to see all of you sign, like I taught people last night, the sign for innovation. Please show me. Come on. Innovation. There we go. Not one hand, Barry. 2 hands. One hand is an idea, but to really bring it to fruition, use 2 hands. Thank you.
It's all about learning, after all. Folks, there's a wonderful world out there of that same kind of innovation spirit done by our students and our faculty. I encourage you to walk the entire campus. You'll be amazed, I'm sure. And please stop by the Student Innovation Center where you can see Jackie's wonderful work. You'll be inspired just by that alone. Have a great day, everyone.